The Vera cubs had terrorized 3 star systems before anyone thought to assign them a caretaker. That was, perhaps, the first mistake the Galactic Welfare Council ever made. The second mistake was assigning Mara Ellison. Station Kalos 7 had seen many things in its 200 years of operation. It had processed refugees from the Skarn collapse. It had hosted peace summits between species who communicated entirely through bioluminescent rage. It had once accidentally imported a sentient fungal colony that ate through 6 bulkheads before anyone realized it was trying to negotiate a trade agreement. But it had never, in all its long and storied history, housed 6 Vera predator cubs who refused to stay in their designated habitat. The cubs were legendary even by their own species standards. Vera were apex hunters, 6-limbed, obsidian-furred, with retractable claws that could score durasteel and eyes that shifted color with their mood, gold for calm, red for fury, electric blue for the particular pleasure of the hunt. Adults grew to the size of large earth horses. The cubs, at roughly 8 months old, were already the size of German shepherds, and infinitely more dangerous. Their names, assigned by the council's xenobiologist, who had since retired to a quiet moon somewhere and refused to discuss the experience, were Kale, Joe, me, New York, Di, Hi, and Wa. 7 cubs. Not 6. The council had miscounted. This was noted in several incident reports. Kale Vera was the leader, the largest, the sharpest, the one whose eyes flickered between gold and red so fast it looked like fire. He had, in the past 3 weeks, dismantled 2 habitat enclosures, eaten a data terminal, and somehow learned to operate the station's internal comm system, through which he had broadcast a sound that the xenoacoustics team described as territorial screaming, but rhythmic, almost like music, if music wanted to eat you. The other 6 followed wherever Kale went. This was the situation Mara Ellison inherited when she arrived on Station Kalos 7 on a Tuesday, carrying 1 duffel bag, a thermos of coffee, and absolutely no fear. "They've rejected the habitat again," Station Commander Paris told her, pulling up the security footage with the expression of a man who had not slept in 11 days. "3rd time this week. The enclosure is rated for Class 4 apex predators." They walked through the wall. Mara watched the footage. Kale had simply lowered his head and pushed. The wall, to its credit, held for about 4 seconds. "Where are they now?" she asked. "That's the thing." Paris rubbed his face. "We don't know. Internal sensors keep glitching when they move in groups. We think they're in Corridor 7, but I'll find them." I'm sorry? "I'll find them." Mara picked up her thermos. "Which direction is Corridor 7? Paris stared at her. He had been staring at her since she walked off the transport, mostly because she was approximately 5'4", looked like she might weigh 50 kilograms soaking wet, and had accepted the assignment briefing, the one that made grown xenobiologists cry, with the expression of someone reading a mildly interesting restaurant menu. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "these are Vera predator cubs. They are considered one of the 12 most dangerous juvenile species in the catalogued galaxy. 2 of our security officers required medical attention last week, and they were just near the habitat." "Did they make eye contact?" Mara asked. "Yes. That's the problem." She started walking. "Which corridor?" She found them by following the silence. Stations were never truly quiet. There was always the hum of recycled air, the distant clank of machinery, the murmur of voices. But Corridor 7 had gone absolutely, perfectly still in the way that only happens when every living creature with working survival instincts has decided to be somewhere else. Mara walked into that silence like she belonged there. They were at the far end, all 7 of them, arranged in a loose cluster with Kale at the center. His eyes were red. The others, Joe pressed against his left flank, me and New York tangled together near his haunches, Di positioned slightly ahead like a scout, Hi and Wa at the rear, watching the corridor behind, all had eyes that shimmered between red and an unsettled, flickering violet. Stressed, the xenobiologist's notes had said. Violet means stress. Mara stopped. She didn't crouch, didn't make herself small, didn't do any of the things the manuals suggested. She just stood there, in the middle of the corridor, and looked at them. Cale looked back. His eyes shifted. Red. Then gold. Then red again. Mara sat down on the floor. Not cautiously. Not slowly. She just folded her legs, settled her thermos on her knee, and sat down like she was waiting for a shuttle that was running slightly late. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Joe, the smallest of the 7, the one with a slightly crooked ear from some pre-station injury no one had documented, took one step forward. Cale made a sound. Low, resonant, somewhere between a growl and a rumble. Joe stopped. Looked at Cale. Looked at Mara. And then sat down too, mirroring her posture with eerie accuracy. Mara laughed. It was a short, genuine sound, completely lacking in fear, and something about it seemed to short-circuit every predatory instinct in the corridor. Cale's head tilted. New York made a soft chewing noise. Di's eyes went fully, unmistakably gold. Mara reached into her jacket pocket and produced a piece of dried protein strip, standard ration, beef-flavored, the kind you could find in any station commissary. She placed it on the floor in front of her. Then she picked up her thermos and drank her coffee. Cale stared at the protein strip for 47 seconds. Mara knew because she counted, because she had nothing else to do and she was patient in the specific, geological way that only humans raised around animals ever really learned to be. Then he walked forward, lowered his enormous head, and ate it. His eyes, when he raised them again, were completely, solidly gold. The official habitat was never used again. This was, technically speaking, a problem. The council had paid a considerable amount of credits for a Class 4 enclosure. Station Commander Paris filed 3 separate reports about it. None of them changed anything, because the alternative, trying to make 7 Vera predator cubs go somewhere they didn't want to go, was something nobody on the station was willing to attempt. What the cubs wanted, it turned out, was Mara's quarters. Not in an aggressive way. Not in an eating-through-walls way. They simply began appearing there, 1 or 2 at a time at first, then in larger clusters, until the station's security team pulled up the overnight footage and discovered that all 7 cubs had somehow fitted themselves into a room rated for 1 human occupant and were sleeping in a pile around Mara's bunk. Cale, specifically, was curled against her pillow. His massive head was tucked under his forepaws. His eyes, in sleep, were soft and gold. Joe was pressed against Mara's feet. Me and New York had claimed the floor beside the bed. Di slept across the doorway like a very dangerous draft excluder. Hi and Wa had found the small space between the bunk and the wall and had compressed themselves into it with the liquid flexibility of creatures who had not yet grown into their full size. Mara was asleep in the center of all of them, one hand resting on Cale's flank, completely unbothered. Paris watched the footage for a long time. Then he called the council. I need to reclassify the habitat request, he said. What do you mean? The cubs have chosen their den. He looked at the footage again, 7 apex predators, the terror of 3 star systems, all piled together around a sleeping human like she was the safest thing in the known galaxy. It's a human. Specifically, it's her. I'm going to need a bigger room. The xenobiologist who had named the cubs, now retired, now peaceful, now tending a small garden on that quiet moon, received a report about it 6 weeks later. He read it twice. Then he put it down, poured himself a drink, and said to no one in particular. Of course it was a human. It's always a human. He wasn't wrong. He never was.